The Hunting of the Last Dragon, from Sherryl Jordan. Chapter 8. Greetings, brother. You are ready early today. Your quill nearly sharpened, I see, and candles already lit, and a merry fire in the grate. A good day for writing. This with rain outside and a cold autumn wind a-blowing. You have the better task, I think. I just saw Brother Nicholas out in the yard, trying to round up the geese and head them into the barn. The abbot wants their feathers kept in fine fettle. Since they're his only supply of quills, he's very determined to have a pile of books copied out, so he can begin his stream of teaching every soul to read. I'm not sure that the geese will be right thrilled about it. They've few enough tail feathers already. All right, I'll continue. God's wrath. You monks have lively ways of getting across your wants, despite your vows of silence. I did not rest that night. I followed the river upstream, knowing it would take us from the woods and back to the town. A little after cockcrow, we left the trees to find a sunny day. I was mortal weary, but dared not stop, knowing Tybalt valued Lizzie and would likely be out on his horse, searching. But I changed the way of carrying Lizzie and took her on my back, as I oft had carried little Addie. It was easier that way, and Lizzie could hold on with her arms about my neck. Traveling northwestwards, we avoided the town, skirting the tilled fields and the meadows, then kept to the tracks through the moorlands. We passed villages and farms, and saw people shearing sheep while others washed the fleeces in the streams. I thought of my mother twisting yarn upon her distaff, and my heart ached. All of me ached, from memories and weariness, and from the beating Richard had given me the day before. Near the middle of the day, I stopped to rest. We had been walking through stony moors following a stream, which I suppose would lead to villages further ahead, where we might get food and shelter for the night. We stopped by an old oak tree, and I set Lizzie down in the shade. I need to sleep, I said. I can't walk night and day without rest. Crouching by the water, I drank deeply, which was brackish but quenching. Lizzie crouched nearby to drink. Would you like a swim? I asked, thinking of the day I had danced in the river with her and raised Tybalt's ire. I think not, she said, for I would gladly have carried her in again. When we had finished drinking, she got her mother's silken dress from where she had dropped it on the grass and washed it in the shallows, cleaning off the grime from last night in the woods. I offered to help her, but she shook her head and went on with the washing, dipping the scarlet folds in the stream, then rubbing them carefully to get off the stains. I wondered that she held the silk so dear, then remembered it was all she had of her old life, all she had of her family, and I thought how I would have given much to have just one little thing my parents had owned, some tiny link, something I could touch that was of them. The washing done, she limped up to the tree and hung the silk across a branch to dry. Then she stood at the edge of the shade, looking out across the rolling wastes we had crossed. Very still she stood, her eyes like polished ebony, her gold-brown skin as glowing as the day. I had not often seen her on her feet, for she had been always sitting in her cage, or else lying on the ground while I cleaned it out, and it was odd to see her standing free like that. Beside the wild moors, looking at her, I felt awkward of a sudden, for her skirts were wet and clinging, and she was willow slender and graceful, and pleasing to the eye. Limping back, she came and sat at my feet, close, her arms about her knees, her gaze still on the moors. "Do you think Tybalt will find us?" she asked. "He'll not find us now," I said. "The rain has washed away our tracks, and his dogs will never get the smell of us. If Richard dies, what then? Will he look again for us and hang me on the gallows? Nay, Richard won't die. 'Twill take more than a chip of wood to kill him off. 'Twill take a falling oak." She laughed a little. "What will we do, Jude?" "Find a village and bake some food and a place by a fire tonight. On the morrow, we'll seek a place for you to stay. A nunnery, mayhap, where you'll be looked after." Frowning, she asked, "What will you do?" "Find a farmer to hire me for work. The lords pay people well to have their land tilled these days. Since the Black Death killed off so many of their workers, I heard that some of the larger estates are going to ruin, from want of men to work them. I could work on a farm." "I think not, Lizzie. Maids either marry or they become nuns, unless they're high-born, and then they might live in the lord's houses and serve the ladies there." "I'm high-born." "That's different." "Why?" "Our high-born maids are not made lame." "Then there's no place for me." "I didn't say that. I think a nunnery would be best. It doesn't mean you have to be a nun. The nuns would look after you until you found something else to do. It would not be an unpleasant life." "How do you know that? Have you lived in a nunnery?" "No, but it would be better than a cage, I'd warrant." "It would be a different kind of cage. I don't want to live in a nunnery. By God's soul, Lizzie, give me peace. I don't want to discuss this now. I've walked all night and half today, and I'm bone weary. I'm tired of fretting about my own fate, let alone yours. Let me sleep for now, and we'll talk on this later." I lay down in the shade. Lizzie didn't move, but she made a little sound as if she wept, and I was sorry I had spoken sharp with her, remorseful, too tired to make amends. I put my arm across my eyes and tried to sleep. But although it was pleasant there by the stream, and I was weary to the bones, I found I could not rest. My nerves were jungled, and a worm gnawed at my conscience over Richard, and because I had stole a maid well paid for by her owner. Also, as the full import of what I'd done began to dawn on me, there were other worries. I had little to do with a maid before, apart from my sisters and the taunting Prue. How would it be between Lizzie and me? Now that we were fugitives and wayfarers together, what would people think of us? Her plainly not my kin, nor I her husband. How would we sleep together in the fields, close for safety, or decently separate? And what of all the ordinary things I would normally do in private, like picking my teeth, or my nose, or scratching myself, or farting, or moving my bowels? 'Tis all very well for you to laugh, Brother Benedict, but all these things were mortal worrying to me. At the time, I even felt discomforted trying to sleep that afternoon, knowing Lizzie sat nearby, mayhap watching me. It is one thing to feed and tend for a maid in a prison, another to live with her in liberty. I slept at last. When I awoke, the sun was on its downward journey, and Lizzie was gone, the red dress with her. Alarmed, I leaped to my feet, thinking Tybalt had come and snatched her off, but then I spied her stumbling and limping further on, still following the stream. Cursing, I ran after her. I got to her at last, and grabbed her arm. Her face was wet with tears and sweat, and she must have been in agony from walking all that way. "What are you doing, dimwit?" I asked. "I'm going on alone. she said, trying to walk on, sobbing with every step. Her shoes and bandages were red. Why alone? I asked. Because I won't be a nun, and I won't be a millstone around your neck neither. You have no duty to help me out. Oh, Lizzie, 'tis not from duty? I said. What is it then? Do you think on me as Richard did? No, never that. Taking both her shoulders, I made her stop. She stood with her arms crossed over her mother's dress, her eyes downcast. She looked so small, so all undone, that I near wept myself from pity. Truth to tell, Lizzie, I said, you remind me of my sister Abby. More, I have no home, no family, and I feel akin with you. It helps me to help you, for it gives me a reason to live. I'll not put you in a nunnery, nor make you do anything you are against, I swear. Now can we travel on together in peace? She smiled a little, and climbed onto my back again, and we went on. The stream was a good guide, for it kept us watered, and took us to more fields of yellow wheat ripe for harvest, then to a village. We spied some fresh-baked oaten cakes cooling in a window, and I'm ashamed to confess that I stole them, for we were hungry. I felt stronger after we had eaten, and walked more quickly, following the lane out of the village, still heading west, my eyes lowered against the sinking sun. I had no idea where I was, or what villages we passed. Since I could not read the millstones on the roads, I thought only to put as many miles as I could betwixt ourselves and Tabant. Sometimes on the lanes between the villages we passed other wayfarers, all traveling on foot, pilgrims on their way home after visiting shrines, or black-gowned friars, or peddlers with pots and pans, charcoal sellers, traders, and lepers. But by sunset the tracks and lanes were deserted, and I began to be haunted by fears of demons and ghosts. And I remembered that the dragon was said to fly at dusk and dawn, and now was a devilishly dangerous time to be out. I wished I had looked sooner for a house to stay. There was a village near, for I could see its church tower above the trees. I cut across a meadow full of rye, and came to the tiny hamlet just as the sun went down. It was a village such as Doran had been, too small for an inn, with only a square towered Norman church, and a few thatch and mud houses crouched either side of the dirt lane. Behind the houses I could just make out, in the gathering gloom, the crofts with summer vegetables, well grown, and tiny farm buildings, and a cart and plough or two. I stood Lizzie on her feet, and she waited in the darkling lane as I approached a house. Firelight glowed inside, and smoke came out the windows, swelling of beans and vegetable broth. From within came sounds of running feet, children shrieking with laughter, boys quarreling, and a dog barking. Above it all a baby bawled lustily, and a woman shouted for peace. I banged on the door, and there was instant silence inside. "You'd best open it, Edwin," said the woman's voice. "Well, go on, you're the man of the house now." There was the sound of a bolt cautiously drawn back, and the door opened a crack. I glimpsed part of a face and one wary eye, before the door was slammed shut again. "It do be a maid and a lad, ma," said a lad. "Well, don't stand there pop-eyed. Let them in." The door was opened wide, and I went back to Lizzie, and she leaned on me as we entered in. The lad who admitted us stood on the threshold a moment, scanning the evening skies. Then he hanged the door shut and bolted it again. For long moments there was total quiet, but for the yelping of a small dog as it jumped around Lizzie and me. Little could I see, for smoke, but the boy threw a bundle of wood on the fire, and in the leaping flame light I saw 3 little children go and cling to their mother's skirt. Their eyes, as round as plates, were fixed on Lizzie's face. 2 other children moved closer to a boy of about 10 summers, who crouched on the dirt by the fire and stirred a cauldron of broth. Pigs and poultry roamed in the rushes of the floor, and a cow with large curving horns was tethered in one corner. The smells, the homeliness, awoke a deep longing in me. "You've brought the freak," said the woman, holding her babe closer and making the sign of the cross. "The freak from the fair, like Audlan. God help us all." "Her name's Lizzie," I said. "I beg of you, good mother, let us stay, and give us, if you will, a bite of food each, and we'll be gone by morning. We'll not harm you or rob you. I swear by Jesus' blessed tree." "It's not a robbing I'm worried on," she said, jiggling the babe to keep it quiet. "The freak's an evil maid, a heathen. I'll not have her in this house, nor you. It's not right. You traveling alone with her, I'll think of you to leave, and right quick." I began to plead with her, but the eldest boy edged past us and opened the door again and began to push me out. Lizzie clung to my sleeve, and I was still begging for a bed for the night when the woman started to scream, "Out! Out!" She shrieked, "Out, afore I call the priest to chase you out, and your devils with you! Out!" I picked Lizzie up and backed out into the night. Still the woman yelled, and people began to come out of the other houses. Hearing the woman's shouts, and doubtless thinking we were thieves, they all started screaming, and some threw stones. One hit Lizzie, making her cry out. A man came out and set his hound on us. I ran then, raising dust in the shadowy lane, while people shouted and cursed, and stones rained all around, and the hound snapped and snarled at my heels. I don't know how far I ran, trying to get away from the damn thing, while Lizzie nearly choked me with her arms, and I shook all over from terror and fatigue. We left the dog at least, and I stumbled on down the pitch-black road. A silver moon was rising, and I could see wheat on either side, and trees black against the starry night, but little else. Then somewhere in the fields a wolf howled, and I glimpsed yellow eyes in the darkness to my left, and was sure a pack was after me. I started running again, gasping and blind, half choked by Lizzie's arms about my neck. Then something flew out of the wheat beside the lane, its wings whirring in the quiet dark, and I near lost my wits from fright. I ran again, and tripped and fell. I remember that. As I went down, I tried to turn so I would not fall on Lizzie. There was a sharp pain in my foot, and I suppose I smashed my head upon a stone, for all became bright stars in blackness, and that is the last thing I remember of that night. And that, I think, is enough to write for now. It must be almost time for bells, brother, and a mug of mead.